A couple of things. First of all, good morning. It's great to be here at the Times Center. A lot of cool venues in this city, but this is one of the coolest. And just think, just a few floors above us, somebody's working on the next wave of Wordles for the next few weeks. Very exciting. All right. Second thing, big shout out to Greg Morris. I just want to acknowledge his leadership. He represents the workforce development field so well, but also is an important voice on human service issues in general, and I just really appreciate everything Greg has done, both in this role at NYC, ETC, as well as in past roles. So thank you, Greg. All right, and he's a big social media guy. You know, he walks the streets of New York and tells you what's going on, right? And puts that across social media. My LinkedIn feed is way more exciting because of Greg. But the other person who enlivens my LinkedIn newsfeed is Maria. Time for a selfie, Maria.
All right, let's go. Wait, I gotta get the panelists in. Greg, you're not in there.
Greg's got to be in there.
There we go.
All right, awesome. Okay. And I was a paper boy, but we won't go into that. I did deliver an afternoon paper. I knew enough at 12 years old not to get up at 5 a.m. to deliver a morning newspaper. That I knew. All right. So really excited to be here. We have limited time and a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to keep my opening comments very, very brief. Some years ago, Philanthropy New York hosted a talk by the late Richard Ravitch, who is one of the city's great civic leaders of the last 50 years. He was a real estate developer by trade, but he was also lieutenant governor, chair of the MTA, and was part of the team that saved the city during the fiscal crisis in the mid-1970s. And by the way, now currently streaming is a great documentary about that fiscal crisis called Drop Dead City. If you've not seen it, I highly recommend it. Very important historical context for where we are today. Chris Quinn is giving that a thumbs up.
Yes.
Anyway, in that talk at Philanthropy New York, he described the environment of the infamous 3 men in a room scenario in Albany to determine what the state's budget would be for the coming fiscal year. And Ravitch noted that the budget battles were ultimately business interests versus labor. And then he said, pointing to everyone in the audience, that all of you, the nonprofit sector and the common good, were never at the negotiating table. You were on the menu. Now, I am happy to report that we are no longer consistently on the menu. Thanks to hard work and ongoing organizing, the voice of human services in the workforce development sectors has been heard loud and clear in City Hall and at the state capitol. To reinforce that claim, I would suggest you read the op-ed in City and State that was co-authored by Speaker Adrian Adams and Michelle Jackson of the Human Services Council and was published yesterday. In that article, Adams and Jackson urged the incoming administration going into City Hall to work with City Council and the sector to build upon the reforms that have been made to the complex municipal contracting and payment system that has made life hell for nonprofits across the 5 boroughs. That op-ed and its contents is just one example of the results that have been generated by the advocacy done by many in this room and elsewhere. But there is still much work to be done, and there are still many in the sector who do not weave advocacy into their daily work. So we have 3 leaders on stage here with me, and I truly mean that, who have for many years made advocacy part of their daily work. And for the next 30 minutes or so, well, 28 minutes and 55 seconds, we're going to talk about the state of advocacy, the continuing need for advocacy, and why advocacy needs to be a priority for you and your organization. So please welcome Greg Bishop, Maria Lizardo, and Chris Quinn. So thanks for being here. Love the shoes, Maria.
Thank you.
I do too.
Those are great.
I bring the sparkle everywhere.
That's awesome. So we have like 4 kind of open-ended questions that I'd like to share with our panelists this morning. And so I want to start with the first one, and it's really, from your vantage point, what is power in this city? How do you see it operating? Who holds it? Who doesn't? And what needs to shift for communities to have a real seat at the table? And Greg, you've been on both sides of this. You're now in the funding community, private funding community with me, but you've been inside government. So I'm curious kind of your perspective, given that you've seen this from a couple of different perspectives.
Yeah, thank you for having me. You know, when I think about power, I think about the people. I think of the time when I was in government and, you know, when the people who advocated to actually get into my office, to actually, ask for particular services in their community, it's the people, right? The people who are organized, the people who had a clear ask. You know, sometimes you think the power is within these walls of government, but if the people are not happy, then, you know, government can't operate. And certainly we've seen that in the past here in New York City and elsewhere. But what I will say is that it is very difficult to organize people and institutions, and I've seen different cultures. There are certain cultures who it's innate in the culture to actually be together. And so when the ask comes, it's a particular ask, it's a specific ask, and they move as a block. And so if you don't deliver, then there's consequences, right? And I think that's where the power is. So if you look at, you know, communities, you know, I'm from Brooklyn, you know, East Flatbush, you know, Brownsville. We've talked about Brownsville a lot. And, you know, I think the people have said, like, we want better conditions, right? And the elected officials have to answer to that. And the elected officials come to government and say, hey, we need better conditions, which resulted, I think, actually not Bloomberg, de Blasio, the de Blasio administration, where at one point in time, every single agency was focused on Brownsville. And I think that's where the power comes from the people.
Okay, great. Maria, from your vantage point, what can nonprofits do to be taken more seriously by policymakers?
So for far too long, we have been too polite, right? We just fucking take a contract. Oh, it's 50 cents on the dollar. I'll make it work. Oh, 60 cents, you know, whatever it is, right? And we've been afraid to push back. But guess what? When you talk about power, we have a lot of power. We have a lot of people who work in our organizations, and those very same people live in the same communities that we serve. We have our community members that come to us for services. There is power there, right? We have our board of directors, you know, whether your board is community-based or you have, you know, people with a lot of money, there is power there. Our failure has been in not tapping into that power. So I do want to share some of the successes of the Human Services Council around the Just Pay campaign, which is an attempt, and a really good damn attempt, to tap into that power and organize our workers. It is a campaign centered around workers, on workers. It is the story of our workers. It's not about the executives, because we can knock on the doors all we want, and, you know, this is what we need, but who's gonna listen to us, right? It's really about our workers sharing their stories, but also being involved and being part of the campaign. So the campaign launched in 2021. In City Hall, we had a rally in March of 2022. We had 1,500 people, right? Unheard of, right? It's like, what, 1,500 nonprofit staff are out here? In May of 2022, we did another rally, another 1,500, and that year we secured $60 million in our workforce investment, right? It wasn't enough, the workforce enhancement, it wasn't enough, but we kept at it, right? Because when you're doing this work, it's about the long haul run, right? It's not, you know, these short-term wins, we gotta stay at it. At the state, for the first time in over a decade, we also got a COLA, $500 million. I'm even stumbling to say it because the previous administration gave us nothing, even though we would ask for it. In May of 2023, we brought out 6,000 people, right? We shut down the street right outside of City Hall. So when you talk about power, that is power, right? We had 50 executives that slept outside of City Hall. I mean, I was one of them. I was not excited about sleeping on the concrete jungle of New York City because I don't camp, but we were out there, right, raising our voices, you know, because we have skin in the game as well, right? So that year, we got another workforce enhancement. It wasn't what we asked for, but guess what? A year later, we got $741 million from the city, a 3-year COLA investment, right? And that was because of all that organizing that has taken place. But even more impressive, today we have more than 10,000 people who have joined the campaign, the Just Pay campaign. We have sent over 14,000 emails to elected officials. Over 10,000 people have joined our rallies, have been advocates, over 200 meetings with legislators, over 2,100 organizations have signed on and individuals to the campaign. In state lobby days, there will be 15, 20 people. This past year, 350 people went up to Albany. So when you talk about building a movement, that is what that looks like. And that is what power is. And guess what? We are ready for the new administration, because if you don't stand by us, if you don't do and build upon what has happened in the previous administration, we're going to show you as well that we are strong and we're going to come for you.
All right. Before I go to Chris, Maria, you mentioned at the top of your remarks taking the not great contract. That could be defined as a bad habit. Are there some bad habits we should stop doing?
That's part of the bad habit. Part of the bad habit is just accepting every contract that comes our way. You know, don't apply. Just don't apply and say why. Like, don't say quiet. Like, don't apply and just be like, it was really shitty contracts, so I'm not going to apply. No, tell everyone, I'm not going to apply, and this is why, right? That is one. And I know we can't really be organizing a push back on some of this because it's collusion. I'm not an attorney, but from what I hear, you know, collusion is a thing. But we need to push back on what, you know, these contracts are going to pay us. And I think we've done a good job on the procurement piece, pushing back, you know, demanding that we get paid on time. And we have seen some real reform. But complacency, we don't have an option to be complacent. Like, we need to continue to build on that. And part of the bad habit is that we go back into our trenches and we go back into doing the day-to-day work, and we're so busy that we don't find the time to send that email, to call that elected, to call that commissioner, to push the administration at both the city and the state level. And I do want to mention the other piece of the organizing is that 2 years ago, we also launched the C4. It's called Human Services Action. And for the first time last year, we released a scorecard on the state electeds. We chimed in on the primaries at the mayor's level and the New York City comptroller, and we weighed in also for the elections. And we're going to continue building on that, because we want to make sure that our workers know you have the right to elect folks who are going to represent you and your interests. And if they don't, you can also vote them out. And so that is the other piece that we're building now.
Great. Thank you.
And I have cards if you're interested in signing up for the C4 email. I have them in my pocket. Come see me.
Excellent, Maria. Always the organizer. So this was not in the script, Chris, but how long have you been at WIN now?
It was 10 years last month.
Wow,
Oh,
10
wow.
years. Wow.
Yes.
So I remember when you came to WIN,
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, this is going to, and I knew you had worked in the nonprofit sector before going
Right.
into city council and being speaker, but I thought, all right, this is going to be interesting. What would this be like? Chris Quinn running a nonprofit like this, right? And I won't go, there was a memorable site visit that was, that I knew Chris was the right person for the job. But the thing I was really wondering about was she going to bring these incredible chops that she had gained through her experience at city council and being speaker, and bringing that to WIN. And let me just tell you, I could use stronger language than what I'm about to say now, but holy cow. Chris, what you have done on behalf of the sector and in your part of the human services sector, and bringing your voice and the muscle of WIN on several policy wins has just been terrific.
Thank
so I
you.
just think we need to acknowledge that, and thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, and I just will say, Doug and the Clark Foundation is one of the few foundations out there that funds advocacy. And we have, if I do say so myself, a terrific advocacy department at WIN. But the first money we ever got to create it, because when I got hired for the job, I said one of the things, I'm only going to take the job if you let me do a couple of different things. And one was build out advocacy, and it wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't be where we are without Clark, no doubt.
Thank you.
No doubt.
Thanks. Thank you. That was a fun grant.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was. So, like Greg, you obviously were speaker and city council person, and now you're on the nonprofit side. I mean, what's your take on all of this?
Well, you know, I think there are a lot of misconceptions about what is power on a local level based on what we see in places like Washington. So in New York City, the campaign finance law changed everything.
Yeah.
Because yes, is it and the restrictions that got put in place around lobbying and LLCs and LLPs giving money really, really changed the game. I was in my fundraising office once when I was running for mayor, and my fundraiser said, who passed this stupid law that said LLCs and LLPs are corporations, which of course they are. And I was like, hi, you're working for her. So it really put a crimp in fundraising. But now, somebody who gives $100 is as significant as somebody who can, bundle more money, because it all, goes up and up and up. And if you're a registered lobbyist, which I now have to be, which is the greatest thing ever because it really caps how much money you can give people, you're really capped, as is your family. So that really levels out any belief that big money is going to play an oversized role. Although the most recent election with all the IEs, I thought we had kind of capped that down. We have to address that. But nonetheless, we need to not think that big money is the key in New York, because it's not anymore. One. Two, a person who is a head of a block association or a nonprofit is as important, I promise you, as a major real estate developer, because that real estate developer doesn't necessarily command a lot of votes. But if you're head of a block association, you can move hundreds of people one way or another, and you can turn out hundreds of people who are going to petition or do this or knock on doors or make telephone calls or whatever. So power really lies everywhere. It's a question of how you harness it. And in New York City, I think it's important, and we've seen this in the nonprofit sector. I mean, I have to say, and I say this with love, when I was speaker, the nonprofit sector was the whiniest. The whiniest. Our contracts are late. Nobody cares about it. Stop! Get out of my office. I don't want to hear the whining. What are you going to do about it? How are we going to fix it? And when you embrace that, you really, really can change things. The second thing that is critical you have to recognize your power. Then you have to use it. And by use it, I mean, don't be whiny, but be ever present and even annoying. If you think calling once makes a difference, you're wrong. If you think having the meeting and then waiting for the call back, you're wrong. There are, at any given time, hundreds of things coming at elected officials and their staff. You have to remain in their face consistently, even when you don't have something on the agenda, so they don't forget about you or they think of you as the expert they should reach out to. 3, don't think having power means having friends. It doesn't. If you want a friend, get a goddamn dog. You know what I'm saying? Elected officials will be nice to you. They'll be pleasant. They may go to your event. That doesn't mean they're your friend, right? And you don't want to be their friend. You want to be the person that they respect and the person that they are afraid of. So, of course, be kind, be polite, be polite when you have to. But don't think like having access is the same thing as, somebody you're going to go to the movies with. The other thing you want to remember all of the time is that two things. One, there's always a good strategy of having inside people and outside people, right? There's nothing wrong with having a good cop, bad cop strategy as long as you know that's what you're doing and you're conscious of it. And there's lots of examples where that's worked well. Also, don't be afraid to escalate. If you can have power by doing a local fundraiser, by volunteering, by going in and having the meeting where you present the policy agenda. But if you continue to get blown off, go to the streets, go to the press, flood the emails, flood the offices, do a protest. It makes a difference. It absolutely does. There's no question about it. The last thing I'll say is if you're gonna recognize and then utilize your power, have your facts. Have your facts. Because elected officials are by definition generalists. You all in your areas are issue experts. So that electeds are going to have their staff who are the issue experts. You want to be able to push back with facts, because that elected official, if they're the speaker or the mayor or the governor or whatever, they have to go convince a whole bunch of other people, so you need to know what you're talking about.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Chris. I think, yes. I think it's interesting to me as a foundation who has invested Human Services Council and obviously in the Just Pay campaign, I think that whining has been something that has been turned way down.
Yeah.
Totally,
And
yes.
that we've been very clear about the
Yeah.
constructive asks and needs that we want. So I just
Yep.
make
And being present, right?
Yeah.
Because branding is important. Like when people see me, they're like, oh, here comes Just Pay, you know, yeah, it's Just Pay, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's really important.
So I'm going to. We have like 3 questions to go here, but I'm going to move to the third question and then come back to second and then the wrap-up question. But how do we invest in this? I mean, you know, what do we have to do? What is the concrete things that people in the audience, both here live and in person and on the live stream, can do to drive more investment in this power building that you all 3 have talked about? How does that happen? How do we scale and build upon the successes that we have had in the last couple of years with Just Pay and some of the other work that the coalition and others have been doing? Greg, do you want to start?
Yeah, you know, I think, and you know, coming from the foundation side, and I have to say, so there's a difference between, you know, sort of the family type of foundations and also the board level foundations. I'm on the board of the Robert Stern Clark Foundation, and we make investments.
Bookends.
Yeah,
Same family. Anyway.
we make investments in organizations where it's a cohort model, and there is some clear, you know, investment in developing leaders, right? And I think, you know, we talk about, you know, Christine, we talk about Maria, but how do we develop more, like build that bench of individuals who can actually take the baton and continue running, right? Maria is only one person, right? And you know, when you look at also the generational divide, right? How do we empower the next generation to understand the, you know, fundamentals of organizing, the fundamentals of like, yeah, making an ask. You know, I'm showing my age now, but my concern with Gen Z is that, you know, they know how to get your attention, but then, so they get your attention, but then the question is like, okay, what do you want? And it's silence, right? And I'm making a gross generalization, so if you're Gen Z, apologize. Millennials might understand this a little bit, but as a Gen Xer in the room, I'm like, okay, you got my attention, now what do you want, right? And it's like, oh, you know, it's like, you're giving me trauma because now I have to figure out what you want, right? It's like, you know, like, I'm like, you know what I mean? So I think, you know, taking the lessons from, you know, the older generation and passing it down, and doing it in a structured way where we build that bench and we build a stronger bench. Because as you know, when Maria retires, like we can't fall back, right? We have to have, you know, soldiers out there in the forefront. So I think for philanthropy, we definitely need to make investments in those particular areas where we see that there is, you know, a clear goal to develop the next generation of leaders, and so I think that's one of the ways we can continue continue making investments.
I mean, Greg has called me old several times now, but it's okay.
I'm with you.
You know, it's okay. It's okay. No shade. I know it's all right. I think as organizations, we have to make a conscious decision to invest in advocacy, right? So at first, when I have 11 years in my role, it was me going out there, making sure I was seen and visible and, you know, knocking on doors. But recognizing that we need to build this bench, you know, we created a coordinating attorney position for policy and advocacy, a full-time role, you know, dedicated to this. But we're also making sure that we're infusing advocacy throughout the organization. So making sure people know about Just Pay, you know, when we did the Day Without Service, we closed part of our programs that day. So really making sure that it is not just me doing this advocacy work, it is NIMIC as a whole. Being part of coalitions is also very important, right? Because you can't do this work alone. So yes, you're paying these dues, but you have to show up. Like you have to be at the table when these decisions are being made by the coalition, what advocacy is gonna look like, you know, you have to be at the table. Yes, we're all busy, we're all stretched thin, But if we don't make that conscious decision to invest in advocacy, whether it's 10% of one person to get you started, right, we're not going to see the results of this. And we're going to constantly keep falling behind. We don't have enough. We don't have enough. Well, we don't have enough because we're not being direct in our asks for what we need, but also showing up for what we need. So definitely, you know, please, you need to make that conscious investment.
Okay, so I'm hearing leadership, I'm hearing infrastructure within organizations.
Look to the people that you work with or that you serve to be part of your advocacy and your power. So for example, we at WIN, we run transitional housing shelter, but we also run supportive housing. So we've started and created a speakers bureau within supportive housing. It's a little easier there because it's permanent, right? They're not moving on every year or year and a half. But, and we had one mom who's a mom who has some mental health challenges, also has a disabled son, and she was lost her SNAP benefits, right? She went on Good Morning America, CNN, and CBS National with her son talking about it. Let me tell you, she was a million times more compelling than I could have been talking about it. So that's a resource we haven't used enough in the past. And folks think, oh, well, the client, they're not going to be, they're going to be completely articulate, but then do training, right? Seize that opportunity there, that entity. We recently created a mentoring program for the young men and young women in our supportive housing, and they articulated that they want to get involved in advocacy. So we did a night of, you know, I keep saying letter writing because I'm old, but, you know, email writing to elected officials with the young people. That really makes a difference because it's harder to say wait when it's somebody who is actually in the situation. And I don't think we utilize enough the people that we serve and work with.
Okay. Great. So we have two quick questions, 6 minutes. Here we go. So, and it's been touched on in the comments so far from the speakers that you've heard, but I think we need to talk about federal government, the Trump administration. I think the one big beautiful, if you thought 2025 was interesting,
right,
the one big beautiful bill will probably make 26 and 27 pretty interesting for what work you do, you all do. What do we have to think about as it relates to kind of the next couple of years? There's this major, in my estimation, this major legislation that's been passed that is totally restructuring the social safety net, not to the better. So what do we have to do as folks who manage the social safety net in this city be ready for, and how does advocacy play into that?
So if you ask me what keeps me up at night, it's you know, everyone in this room who are running organizations that are going to be facing tremendous challenges.
Yeah.
As you know, philanthropy can't fill that void. And the challenge for me, and I think you know for all of us, is that the nonprofit sector has been sort of like the hidden hand, has kept, you know, I remember I was in a conversation, this was with Mayor de Blasio, and we were talking about Chicago and New York. And the crime rate in Chicago versus New York. And he was just like offhandedly like, you know, why is that? And someone around the table was like, it's because of our nonprofit sector in New York City. The nonprofit sector in New York City are playing an essential role in communities all across every single borough that government can't handle. And I think that needs to be brought up more and displayed more in terms of like the impact that the nonprofit sector has. You know, everything from, you know, whether you're a food kitchen, whatever it is, it's simply, you know, you're providing essential service. And what does that translate to in terms of reducing crime, you know, everything else around there. You know, furthermore, I think that then, and whatever it is, whether it's a study or impact study, whatever it is, but then that needs to be then championed by our local government and then obviously our state government. I am concerned, and then certainly then you switch over to C4, and then you make sure our federal folks understand. But you have to be able to speak the language of the current party. And I'm going to say the current party because we could go both ways at some point in time. And I will tell you this, like, you know, if you talk to a Republican from Kentucky, they care about crime, they care about safety, they care about, you know, helping individuals with skill sets, et cetera. So you can't go there and say, like, you know, Trump is terrible. right?
Yeah.
You have to go there and say, like, this is why we are important, right? We are important in New York, we're important in Kentucky, we're important in West Virginia. And I think that is something that, if it's not already being talked about, that we should figure out a way to sort of like empower the community to do that work.
Great.
Philanthropy can't fill the void, but they can certainly speak up about the void and step up at a moment in time when we need for them to be more vocal and be more involved and do more coalition building. The same way we're doing more coalition building around advocacy, making sure that we're uniting our voices and being clear in our messaging, philanthropy can do that. So yes, you're right, they can't fill the void, but they can do that. The other thing that I would encourage folks is really to get involved, right? I know we're all busy and all of that, but it is gonna take all of us to make sure that we highlight to the state and to the city what our priorities are. Like, we have to make sure that people are fed and they have a roof over their head and their communities are safe, and we need to keep talking about that. You know, we can't shy away and retreat, even in the face of devastating cuts. Like, that's when we need to be louder and push more on what it is that we need, because we need to weather the storm, right? And it's more of a hurricane and a tornado, but we need to be able to do that. And now is not the time to retreat. So I encourage all of you to get more involved, to find ways to do this, whether it is through your organization or other coalitions. Just get involved and be a part of this movement, because we're the ones that have to speak up on behalf of and with our communities.
Great.
You know, it's what we have to be watchful for is local and state government just saying there's nothing we can do. Everything from the feds is too difficult, it's too hard. In, you know, the Heritage Foundation or whatever hateful group it was, put out a Project 2025, right, which was the blueprint that Trump said he had nothing to do with. So at the beginning of 2025 at WIM, we put out something called Project Hope 2025, which basically articulated the ways the city and state could, if we weren't able to beat back parts of Project 2025, what they could do. Because in fact, they all have agency and can do things. Now, some of it will, if the Trump stuff goes through, will require money, there's no question, but not all of it, right? So there's potentially big hits, you know, to the few Section 8 vouchers that are out there. The emergency housing vouchers are going to be gone. So yes, you could say the only answer is to put more money in for vouchers, and that would be great. But for example, if we administered the present FHEPS vouchers better, and it didn't take 235 days by the mayor's own admittance to get a voucher and get out of shelter, we would be able to make up for some of those federal cuts without spending a lot more money. In fact, by saving money, because it's way cheaper with the voucher, if we held the administration accountable and made them do the program better. Actually, the council next week is going to pass 3 bills that are going to help make that happen. So we're not without power, and there's ways to do it that aren't even just about money, but easy for elected officials to say, I know, I'm happy to come to that rally and scream about Trump. That's not enough. That is not enough.
Okay. We're almost out of time, but Greg, I'm going to take a few minutes, and we have a lightning round final question. So here we go. If you could place one bold, politically courageous priority on Zoran's first 100-day agenda, what would that would measurably advance mobility and affordability for New Yorkers? What would it be? Lightning round, Chris Quinn.
Fix the FHEPS vouchers administration, and I said I would say more than one because I'm a former elected official, and 2, embed in all of the transitional housing facilities real income building job training program, because why are we surprised when people leave shelter without a living wage job and then return to shelter?
Maria, thank you. Good idea.
Fully fund contracts so we can pay our staff the living wage that they deserve.
So I would say, I'm thinking about the individual training grants. It would be great if we got full funding for individuals who did not complete college to get training grants to develop a skill that's going to be in demand because of AI.
Excellent. Thank you. Greg, Maria, and Chris, many thanks for your advice, analysis, and insight about the current moment and what we all have to do to push our colleagues in government at all levels to keep front in mind the clients and communities we serve. I want to close and return to Richard Ravitch. He wrote a memoir called So Much to Do, a full life of business, politics, and confronting fiscal crisis. He wrote the following, and I quote, "In a democracy, if you insist on being above politics, you cannot govern well." If all of us insist in this room and online, insist on being above politics and do not pursue advocacy, then we will not succeed in meeting our missions and delivering programs and services that are so desperately needed in the city and across the state. So again, I thank the three of you. Great insight and wisdom. Thank you for being here. We'll move on. Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.